Before introducing our two curators, Stefano and Bas, I would like to recognize a number of special guests tonight. Takashi Homa, Gert-Jan Kochen, Aglaya Conrad, Ari Markopoulos, and Marianne Muller, who are among the artists who are contributing to the show, are here tonight with us. I want to thank you for your brilliant work. We are proud to facilitate its provocative presence in the exploration of architecture as a public concern. I want to thank you also Christopher Dyvik and Mark Allen and graphic designer Julie Peters and Scott Ponig, who together have given this project a beautiful spatial and visual expression. Francesco Garuti, Associate Director of Programs, and Emily Retailleau, Curatorial Assistant, who have worked closely with Bas and Stefano the last few years to realize this major project. The many CCA staff who have made a vital contribution to the conception, research, design, discourse, mounting, administration, and communication of this exhibition. Thank you all for amazing work and for being here this evening. Je voudrais remercier aussi pour leurs appuis généraux qui ont rendu ce projet possible le Conseil des arts du Canada, le ministère de la Culture et des Communications du Québec et le Conseil des arts de Montréal. Et c'est également un grand plaisir pour moi d'accueillir nos invités distingués, Madame la consul générale d'Allemagne, Madame Susanne Aschi-Gletius, le consul de la Hongrie, Madame Timea Kovacs-Stabo, et Monsieur le consul honoraire des Pays-Bas, Michael Pollack. Now I would like to provide you some context for this exhibition. The Life of Documents is the first part of a long-term project that revisits our photography collection and questions the relationship of photography, new media, and architecture in light of certain profound changes of the last 2 decades. These photographs, acquired by Phyllis Lamper in 1974, mark the beginning of our photography collection, 5 years before our founding as an institution in 1979. From the variety of this photo, you really understand already how large is the idea of architecture here at the CCA. I was actually at dinner yesterday night with Jeffrey James, and he was like telling me that, yeah, he was impressed that one of the first acquisition was actually the butt of his dog. So the collection, growing to tens of thousands of images, would draw our eyes beyond buildings, where the physical changes of an environment and the life inhabiting it are inextricably linked. This shift of attention would redefine architecture photography and in turn confirm that architecture is really a way of looking at the world. Photography has been a part of that way of looking. As the late Paolo Costantini CCA curator of photograph from 1995 to 1997, here photographed by Guido Guidi with Phyllis in 1997, he said in 1994, beyond having an application, photography has a presence in architecture of the 19th and the 20th centuries. But today, in both degrees and kind, lens-based images have a completely different presence in society, in architecture, and at the CCA. And since photography is part of the CCA anatomy, then the presence of the CCA changes too. So the long-term project embarks to ask, how might it change? And along this with other questions. How should we select images when they are produced and shared as rapidly, abundantly, and ubiquitously as they now are? And how do we address the question of authorship when social and technical means of image generation prevail that are difficult to explain in conventional terms of artistic origin? Donc, le projet photographique se déroulera jusqu'en 2030 et comprendra des autres expositions majeures, au-delà de celui que vous allez voir dans les galeries ce soir, ainsi que des séminaires, des publications et de nouvelles bourses et des stages. Toutes ces activités viseront à favoriser une dialectique vivante entre les CCA et l'évolution de la réalité actuelle basée sur l'image. Bien qu'il aborde des questions qui n'auraient pas pu être explorées de la même manière il y a 50 ans, le caractère de ces projets à long terme est tout à fait cohérent avec le caractère critique et interrogatif de la collection née il y a 50 ans. So now a little bit about our guest. Stefano, Graziani, and Bas Princen take this character as a fundamental premises of our Life of Documents photography as project. By selecting key projects from the last 50 years and illuminating processes that precede and follow them, Stefano and Bas invite us to understand photography as a means to reveal transformation in the world, driven by intensive and comprehensive iterative methods similar to those you might see in architectural projects, with the same scope of research, the same thesis to sense and affirm reality. A photographer trained as an architect, Stefano Graziani observes spaces for cultural reflection, like museums and galleries, and his images are distillates for the uncanny atmospheres. He brought his eye to our 2020 publication project, The Museum is Not Enough. And this you see some of his photos of our vaults, like actually where the photography collection is hosted, which was our own self-reflection, and meanwhile conduct an exploration of a specific archive, which will become the 2020 single publication document from Gordon Matta Clark Personal Library. Bas Princen photographic work resonates with the CCA view of photography as an act of observation that can prefigure, direct, and elucidate architectural phenomena. As a research in the 2016-17 CCA Mellon Multidisciplinary Research Project, called Architecture and for Photography, Bas' insights have had a formative influence on the long-term photography project. Bas has also gone to author a CCA single for coming publication called The Copies, in which he experiments with sequencing enlargements of selected photographs to demonstrate photography's ability to transmit the three-dimensionality of the built world. I would like to thank Bas and Stefano for their singular contribution to photography, to architecture, to the CCA, and to its significant exhibition. And now I give them the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Giovanna. Today we will try to give you some keys to see the show again. We know it's open from 5. We would like to try to make like to give you some information about how we thought about this project. But first of all, we want to make a little moment to thank some people that help us very much. So at first we have to thank Giovanna and Mirko, because when we started to discuss this project, Mirko was still here at the CCA. In a way, we started a long time ago with the possibility of visiting the collection.
Of course, also, we would like to thank really deeply Francesco and Emily for really helping us constantly sharpening every decision that we were making it possible that it's also clear to the audience.
We are working on a book with the publication department, and we have been working on some texts. Therefore, we are very thankful to Victoria Addona and Albert Ferret and Giacomo Rossi, which they helped us during the 2 years, actually, where we wrote, or we tried to write.
Yes, and Anne and Sebastian for their really amazing work in constantly revising the exhibition setup.
The project is also done by different layers. One is a cinematographic part. We have been doing several studio visits, which have been filmed and recorded. They are 9. They are available in the show. We need to thank all the digital department of CCA and Jonas Spriesterbach and Nina Wesemann, which have been traveling with us all over the studio visits.
And lastly, of course, the architects of the exhibition who, even from a distance, because we only met here for the first time, so over Zoom we were talking about the exhibition, Christopher and Max, Divik and Hyven architects, they did a wonderful job on a distance, and it's amazing.
The book, we have said we are preparing a book, but the second mic. But the exhibition, the graphic design for the exhibition has been done by Scott Pernick and Julie Peters. So thank you very much. We are very happy and proud of this show.
I also think it's nice that most of them are duos. So most of them are always 2 people And I think it was key that CCA invited us as a duo, that we are photographers, we are not normally working together, we are working individually. But for this exhibition, we were paired together. And I think it was wonderful because it gave us really the opportunity to see things from two sides and to ping pong up and down. And I would like to thank Stefano very much for this.
Of course, thank you, Bas. We never argued. We could,
Well,
we tried to find a balance. I think we did. And I think we learned a lot from each other. We know each other for a long time, and now we know each other even better.
I think lastly, we would really love to thank Phyllis, because she had the courage to understand that when you make an archive, an institution about architecture, that photography is immediately the mirror. So the archive of photography is an incredibly big resource that always was in parallel. And I think this is a foresight that she had that is now, you could say, now we can pick from this incredible action that she made. So we would love to acknowledge this.
So we would like to start trying to say how we developed this project and how we developed this research. We start from the collection. Of course, we consider the collection of CCA as a starting point. In specific, the photographic collection, as we could study and explore over the past years. The first time we were here, it was 2015, is a collection that is as large as it would be a collection for an institution completely devoted to photography. This was a great surprise for us. And it became very clear immediately that CCA embraced photography as no other institutions that we could visit, that we could know. So from the beginning, studying the collection, we were put in front of the definition of architectural photography, which we understood it goes far beyond the cliché of it. So as, for example, a photograph that depicts a building as an object. But more, it's a collection which shows questions that photographers made to the world, looking at it and documenting it. So we realized that as a potential, and how architectural and built environment and our contemporary landscape has been informed by photographers. We want to show some examples of the show, of what we selected, both from the collection and later from loans. This is a work by Louis Bolz, which he published in 1974. It's New Industrial Parks near Irvine, California. All these aspects were, in a way, the path which at the end put us to find the title, The Lives of Document. It's a title that we find almost at the end of our research. We try mirroring the approach CCA has towards the archive of architectural offices. So trying to collect as much as possible complete documents to show not final object, final works, but more the process of it. So in this case, we can consider the work by Louis Bolz as an example, since we can say it's a complete project, it's the full portfolio, and it's actually the first of his works he did in the topographical research he was doing. From this work, we can add some of the thought we had. For example, the one of proximity. We realized that many of the authors, in some period of their life, have been working on the proximity of the place they were knowing better. Louis Bolz was living not far from this context. He was interested in depicting and representing the new industrial parks as places where the future would have take place, places where people would have been living. So he was interested, as many other artists, actually all of them, in the future, how the world would have been changed and how to document this. Mirroring this approach, the approach of collecting as much as possible complete projects and being focused on the process, we realized rather soon that we were thinking about photography as a research tool, which actually cleared for us many definitions that we were trying to give to photography. And photography as a research tool is for sure a structural and beautiful definition that probably also clears the reasons why this project, this research project that we did, is possible only at CCA. How is the show organized? We organized the show as one room. And the selection of the projects are moving within the tracks of historical perspective, historical and contemporary perspective, we can say, to position the works and also to trying to detect possible paths and possible lines towards the future. We can say, of course, that these paths are not linear. We cannot say that. And thinking about the display, the nonlinear design of which was taught by Christopher Divick and Max Caven of the show, we think underline this and makes possible encounters with works and authors that a strict chronological and linear order would not make possible. We think that a visitor can encounter authors. For some time, we considered the approach of Paolo Constantini. He was curator of photography here at CCA during the 90s. And probably we also think and thought that loss and love were a reason, or are a reason, which for some time made this some vision he had suspended, vision which he had about the relation between photographers and architects here at CCA. There is another example. It's in the first room. It's a project by Guido Guidi. It's in between cities. And it's a project that he did between 1993 and 1996. It's an attempt of unifying Europe through a pilgrimage which goes from Russia to Santiago de Compostela. It's in a way a diagonal route that's crossing Europe. It has been made in different steps. Visiting the artists, visiting the photographers, put us in the condition of starting from some project which we thought we knew. But were also a starting point and the beginning for new project, or to detect if there were paths which were left not finished. In the case of Guido, and we could have in the show a book, which is 16 pages, which was done especially for this show, which actually was taught after the questions we did to him. We included in the show many different approaches to publishing. We think that in publishing, independent or non-independent, a lot of the contemporary debate about photography and on photography is happening. And so we included in the show different approaches to publishing, from books made by publishers, so collaboration between authors and publishers, to self-published zines, printed in few copies, even unique, to dummies, a different stage of development, and also to a specific edition made on purpose for this show. We started to try to consider book projects as final and complete, but we also try to consider them as a new beginning and also places where this research path which started has been left interrupted. And in this case, with Guido Guidi, we could, in a way, find a new publication out of of this project. Again, studio visits. All these studio visits were starting from a project we thought we knew. And how we conducted it, where we were filming, but also we tried as much as possible not to alter the voice of the artist and not to alter the idea of the artist. So what we could do as photographer, curating a show on other photographer, is to document the work of them without adding our critique. In a way, we tried to stay documentary in front of the work of other people or of other photographers. We can just, in a way, run parallel to the process of somebody else and look and learn from their view on things and onto the world. So we learned and we questioned to each other how important is the work of others and how many questions this project are arising to us. The works we selected are mainly exhibited on a research table, mainly horizontal. And there is not a precise sequence to visit the show. The show is thought, as we were saying, as one room. There are even no thematics that identifies each gallery. It's a show of authors, mostly. A visitor is free to encounter every author. Maybe something about encounters of which they can mirror some of attitudes of photography. We can also say that photography is about the surface of things. It is sometimes, therefore, encounters and surface. It's not always too important to know precisely about what we are looking for to start a project. We can start looking at the world, and photographing the world means studying and researching it. So the research of a photographer, the research of the photographers we met and we invited starts from looking. About the display. Many of the works are following the author's ideas and the author's wishes to be exhibited. And many of them are exhibited in grids of photographs, and either on the walls and on the tables. So the grid, which is a structure for showing the works which appears in many moments, is founded on a non-hierarchical, regular, and mathematical repetition that allows for infinite possibilities of differences rather than finite possibilities. So we can see many photographs at the same time. So the grid is not to be seen as a limit, and also it clears very much the differences between how to exhibit a photograph and how to deal with a book project. Something else that we have been thinking about from the early beginning is the documentary aspect. We visited Jeff Wall in his studio in Vancouver. We had a studio visit and an interview with him. We decided to exhibit Dominus Vineyard, which is a photograph that he did in 1999 and commissioned by CCA. We selected Jeff Wall to discuss about documentary because it seems that he is the most far to describe this aspect. But looking closely and carefully to his work and to his catalogue raisonné, we immediately know that he made some distinctions between cinematographic and documentary, saying even that what we can do, even in front of a mise-en-scène or something that we can find, is to document it. So even the most extreme mise-en-scène is at the end a document. So we can consider documentary as a genre that is constantly evolving thanks to the research of some artists. We think that also that documentary photography today is not identifying one specific approach to the world, but is open to many, trying to show and to understand the world as it is. We think the artists in the show, with their works, are questioning the issue of the documentary, and we try to ask them as much as possible to think about their work from this point, this perspective. So, from the studio visit, we think that we learned more clearly and that it is possible to say that photography is simple and it's easy, and it's in a way structurally immediate. In the end, so, as we were saying, photography cannot but document what is in front of us. And as a photographer, we need to take the decision how to position ourselves in front of the world we are looking at and for the future of it. I think I will give you the word, Bas, and adding that document can be a synonym for photography, and therefore, following our title, also a synonym for life and for the experience of it.
When we started to do the project, when we were asked to do this project on photography and knowing the collection, of course, the first thing you do is you go and look in your library. Photography is, in my life, photography is in the library, and the library is behind my table. And when I have a question, I know which book I have to see, because it means I did not figure out something about a certain author, and I have to go back to the book. When we started, and because I think every book keeps a kind of visual questions for a very long time. And the choice of the authors, I would say the majority of the authors that are still alive are decided by exactly that fact. The projects that we are interested in hold many questions unanswered to us. We are fascinated, but we don't know everything about them. We decided to, well, of course, you have to understand still, we forget it already very quickly, but this whole project was done during COVID. It was sometimes very difficult to travel, and the majority of encounters were via Zoom. So this was our weekly reality. Weekly reality is we are talking. In this case, you see Richard Mishrach holding a book. And this holding of a book became something kind of funny, because almost everyone who we were talking to had a pile of books next to them or a pile of prints. And every time when you talk, they were like this. Here is Gertjan. This is Marianne showing her work. This is Aglaya in her studio. This is Naoya Hatakayama showing, I think he showed many books, like 20 or so. Ari. So I'm not making it up, so you can see I'm not making it up. And Takashi. And Annette Keln. So this fact that everyone has this wish to show their object or the object in which the images are contained, this somehow told us, yeah, we really have to go and see for ourselves what is in these archives. The archives of the projects, we mean, so for that we have to go to the archives of the photographers. Here you see the archive of Guido Guidi, and this basically is the whole archive of In Between Cities. So if you can read it, but this is the whole archive of, well, not the whole archive, this is Boeri and Basilico, and the project actually is from, help me, from here, Sessione, till there. So that's the project. So very small. So there's a lot of things we didn't look at also. And this is where, in this case, this is the place where in Linea di Confine Atlante is stored, and Atlante is a work by Luigi Ghiri. As soon as you start to open these boxes and you see the objects which are stored in them, they are different than when they are in a book. They are very different than when you see them in an exhibition, because somehow you see the intention of the author very clearly. In this case, in the case of Atlante, the series is finished and there is not much more. But in many other cases, in this case, Naoya's work on the tsunami, in 2011. There are these boxes and boxes and boxes. So if we go back, so I think the tsunami, his tsunami is all the black boxes, in which Naoya photographs the region where he grew up after the tsunami. So the changing landscape, the trying to cope with the disaster that has happened in a visual way. And every box has this kind of endless amount of contact sheets. And these contact sheets show every photo that he took. These are not really meant to be exhibited, but they are part of the project. They are part of the argument that the photographer is trying to make. This doesn't mean that you will get to see it in the end, but every project has layers below and project. Project, I know as in architecture we are used to talk about a project. And a project has an idea, it has a drawing, it has construction drawings, it has a theory, it has all these elements of what you could call a project. For photography, this idea of a project is not so clear, or at least it's not so much conceptualized. We always think that what you see in the book or what you see in the exhibition, that is the project. But the project is much deeper. Like if we say a project for architecture, it has lots of documents, it has lots of decisions, it has many, many other layers that you could say are together forming, what we started to call a visual argument. So an argument that is made by images, that is not an illustration of a thought or an argument of someone else. It is a visual exploration of a thought that you have, and you make it through images. Then one step further for Naoya is a print, and then one step further again would be the final print. Stefano already hinted at, but there's many books in the exhibition. Books, publications, zines, whatever you call it, but they are not your classic understanding of a museum object. The museum object for photography is an image that is hanging on the wall in a certain size, normally hanging almost by itself, and not giving you the context. And we think that, especially for photography, the book or the form of the book is a very important way to experiment, to keep the project together, to give the sequence of a project, and to exhibit, I would really say, to exhibit the project complete. So here we see, it's also on the banner of the exhibition. So this is Thomas Struth, Architectuur der Straße, 1984. And we can imagine, now we look at this as a kind of a sacred object in the collection of the CCA. But for Thomas Struth, this was the moment when he decided to buy 10 little dummies in which he was trying to organize his work in sequences. So they are test versions of books that were not yet made by an artist who was not yet famous, who was still figuring out what to do, how the photographs relate to each other. And I think, therefore, it's important to show it in the exhibition. So to show that this book form is somehow essential to photography, and we have to, I think in the end, in the exhibition, it is interesting that when you see these objects on the tables and you see the images on the wall, that you could perceive them with a certain equality. So they are equally carrying the idea of the photographer. This is another interpretation of a book, which is also not a published book. It's The Copy Cities by Aglaya from 2003 and 2004. There are 12 cahiers, you could say, made on a copy machine. I still don't know if it's called copy cities because it's made on a copy machine, or if it is because every city starts to look like the other. For sure, in her copies, every city is a possible city. And there are, I don't know what is the edition in the end, like 7, no? Aglaya, I don't know. Right? Yes, 7. So there are 7 copies that can be exhibited. So they are not meant to be distributed, but they are meant and made to be exhibited and lived through by the visitor. And the atlas, which arrived today, which is in the exhibition. Another form is, you could say, a dummy, and a dummy in this case is Lebensmittel. The dummy is the object which we as photographers use to organize a book, because sometimes you don't know which picture is first, which is last, and how to fill the middle. So you make a loose version. In this case, Michael Schmidt has like thick pieces of paper. He would lay it out on the floor and try to imagine the sequence. There are all kind of handwritten notes on it, so you can see how many times he changed the order of the book that later came. This is also in the exhibition. Or one of the beautiful books of Bruce Lauman on, this one is called LA Air. Sometimes books carry chapters of a work. And this is, I don't know, we went to visit Takashi, and we asked him if we could exhibit his photographs of the waves and the photographs of the mushrooms for reasons that may be not so obvious, but that doesn't matter. As soon as we arrived, and I always thought there was one book. There was one book on the waves, and there was one book on the mushrooms. And as soon as we arrived, there were 5 books on the waves and 3 books on the mushrooms. And the interesting thing is that, in a way, well, every photograph is different in these books, but also every photograph is almost the same. But they carry every time a different design. They carry a different... so the first, Relax, it's a magazine, no, Takashi? And you hijack the magazine to make your artist book, no? Which I think is a very interesting concept. So because you have a huge audience immediately, it's printed in really many more than a photo book can be printed, and the project exists with the help of someone else somehow. So you hijack, and then it goes from right to left. The white one is the second one, the New Waves 2019, and the last one is a kind of a homage. So the homage, no, to Eggleston. So these books, they give you the possibility to reference, to play, to experiment, to embed your project in the history of photography, and I think this is very interesting. Here we have the table of Ari, full of books, publications, zines. This is on his studio floor, sending us PDFs like this. This is my book, that's the size, very simple, very quick, and this is in the exhibition. Very beautiful to understand that you can have an output of extreme amount of different types of books with photographs that in the end, if you see them all together, it cannot be mistaken that it is by one person. And lastly, we did, from the beginning of the conception of the show, we, as photographers, we said, for us it is most important that the works that are in the exhibition are not fixed. They have not ended. The projects that are in the exhibition are projects that are ongoing, that still can be altered, and that we should make sure that there is a possibility that things can be added. So we asked a couple of the artists if they could imagine either a new chapter of a work that they were doing, or a new version of a book, or a new version of a project. So we have here Marianne Muller with a chapter, which is a book on her work called Stones. Stones from 1987 till 2023. And it's a kind of addition to the work Stairs, etc., that we exhibit in the exhibition. This is not the final book. The final book you can see in the exhibition, but this is, again, the dummy or the tryout that is in the studio of Marianne. And lastly, you know, sometimes things are really not fixed. And with Gertjan Kokke, who makes these amazing maps with layers of historic maps that are projected on top of each other. The historic document of the Second World War, in this case, all the maps of the Second World War made by the Allied forces, by the German forces, by local administration, showing all the kind of decisions and horrors that happened. But this is, Gertjan, which version is this? This is version 1, probably. No, this one. This one is an old one, no? This is not the one that is here. But you hear already, there is version number 7. Exhibited first. It looks similar than this, no? I mean, Gertjan will say it doesn't look similar, but to us, it looks completely similar. And every time when there is a new map that can be added and the work will be exhibited, there is an obligation for Gertjan by himself to add another layer and another layer and another layer. This means this work will not be fixed. The work is in progress, but the work is also finished, but is not fixed. And I think this fact of giving the possibility for photography to stay open, I think this was one of the things that we were most interested in. And somehow I feel that it's in the exhibition, you can feel it.
Thank you for this very interesting presentation. Do you have specific cameras you like to work with?
We have
I didn't see the cameras, photos of the cameras.
You know, we or the artists, it doesn't matter.
You
actually.
and the artists.
No, it doesn't matter. We had the question yesterday too about what is the role of technology somehow. And funnily enough, we have not talked with any of the authors about the technological aspect of cameras, of what you use, how you deal with the file, how you deal with the printing, it somehow was not necessary to talk about this. And I think this is also telling that in the end it is really about photography regardless of what camera you use. You know, some of us use really super high-tech stuff, some of us use really low-tech stuff, some of us use very old stuff, but it's irrelevant somehow. For the author, it should be irrelevant, you know.
Also for the curators.
Yes, and for the curator, exactly, for the curator should also be irrelevant.
Yeah, we never considered the technology for a way to select any project. And in the show there is the presence of any photographic device, but it's not a point to underline. But it's a question that always arises. And it's interesting that this happens.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm interested in time, so I was wondering if you can elaborate in your choice for not doing it chronologically, even if you talk about the future. How can you think forward without thinking in a line?
Chronology is a way to organize our thought, of course. It was also a way to detect the beginning of the show, which is 1963. The oldest work which appears in the show is created by Bernd Becher and Illa Becher, depicting Fachwerk Häuser. And that is the first, let's say, chronologically the oldest work in the show. That time also corresponds to the moment in which photography was filled by new energy, by authors and artists, and in which, like a moment where photography had a big development. Parallel lives. Room number 2, gallery number 2, is dedicated or is the place where to see mostly these projects. So authors that they were needing photography to develop their own projects, and where the idea of project is very clear. That means that sometimes some rules were set at the beginning, and the execution of the project is a mechanical act of taking photographs. That happens for Louis Bolz, that happens for Sol LeWitt, that happens for Douglas Hubler, that happens also for Marianne Wex. That also happens in somehow with Dan Graham, which declared many times that he was an hobbyist towards photography. So maybe the question of which camera was interesting also for him, any. So he was an hobbyist. He was not interested in photography as a perfect image.
But this question of time also hints to the authors themselves. Some of these works that are in here are works that are not finished. We could call them works that will, well, live projects, you could almost call them, that are projects that authors will return to over and over and over and over again because the project is not yet exhausted. It still has questions that have to be answered. So this question of time is not necessarily, but I think in general, the majority of these projects want to deal with the idea of future or the idea of something that is ahead. Otherwise you would, I think none of them here photograph for nostalgic reasons, no?
Thank you for the both of you for introducing your project. I was wondering, you talked about earlier about making a visual argument. And I was wondering about your trajectory through the project. You started exploring the CCA collection at first, and then but I was wondering how you constructed your own argument with the contemporary authors, photographers that you've selected. How did you establish correspondences with the collection, or what was your process?
I think we started by. I'm not sure if I speak for both of us in this case, but the fact that all the photographic objects are objects that can be compared. So every print, every artifact that you could say is photographic, if you document them again, they become comparable also. So this was for us one way to deal with this enormous difference between things that are in the archive and things that are in the studio, because as an institution you would not put them together, but we tried to understand them as objects that have a certain sensibility, that are not historic documents, that are objects which still have a story, and this story can be somehow unpicked by photographing them, documenting them, photographing them in their box, photographing them in the studio, photographing them on the table of CCA, just for ourselves, so because you were asking how do you do, just for ourselves to get them in the same hierarchy.
So how we also selected the project. We started from what we knew, of course, because it's very easy. It's the most direct way, and I think also as photographers, we see what we already know. It's very difficult to see what we don't know or we never have seen before, because we simply don't know it. We don't see it, and so the effort was to try to get into knowing more, starting from what we were already able to, I don't know to understand, but to recognize. And that was the methodology or how we tried to start looking at the collection and then looking at what we defined, what would have been possible to be in the collection and what would be possible to be in the future in the collection. So in a way, trying to build up a possible genealogy, following the documentary, following the built environment, following the visual arguments, following the position of authors within documentary, because we were really pushing on that towards the future. And that was, in a way, the thing. The danger is that then we go on the same things, but I think is a risk that we have to take, like starting from what we partially or already know and we have seen.
I was watching one of the videos in the exhibit, and I didn't remember the gentleman's name, but it was an Italian man, and he was talking about the book and the pilgrimage. There's a map at the back of the book. I was just wondering if maybe did that resonate with you at all during this process, the idea of pilgrimage and journey, because...
Yes,
yeah.
Well, it's a metaphor for moving.
Wanted to say anything on that, or...
Yes, of course it's a metaphor. Of course, in this specific case, we have been talking about it. We probably, well, that is an example of how the landscape could be seen in a way as a contemplative way. However, we try to insert that research in the attempt of unifying Europe. It was done started in 1922, right after the Berlin Wall, 92. And you said the pilgrimage. Yeah, then in this case, probably it's very clear how he is starting from what he already knows.
Yeah, but was it a pilgrimage for us? This is the question.
Probably yes. But without a specific cathedral to reach. Like,
well, the
yes.
studios are a kind of cathedrals in this case. Yeah.
So many of them.
Yeah, so thank you for this conversation about this wonderful project. I was curious to see what would be the next step, or what could be your wishes for the next step of your project. I know that CCA has the tendency to publish a book at the same time of the exhibition. So I was wondering how you see the next. Is it something that will be done? Is there already a book in the making, and or a film or?
Well, the book is in the making, and Victoria Dona, who is the editor of the book, who is here around, is working hard to, finalize the production of the publication. And then, as Giovanna mentioned at the beginning, introducing this night, these Lives of Documents is really the first step of a long-term project. So there will be other shows, there will be other books, seminar conferences, and other kind of research that will keep digging into the relationship between the built environment and photography. So we thank so much Bas and Stefano, because as authors, as photographers and thinkers, and now also as curators, initiated really with us something which is a long future in front of us, and there's a lot of work to do, but we are happy that we started with them. So thank you very much.